When ISMS becomes a checkbox exercise, product security quietly decays, right? When it matters most, design decisions, release pipelines, third party components, and real world threat paths, can pass an audit and still exploitable systems. Why now? Products are shaping faster, supply chains are uh, getting more complex, AI is building up narratives faster, and development changes and velocity and risk. Leaders need ISMS that behaves like living control system, measurable, tested, integrated into engineering and continuous improvement. Today, we are joined by Saurav Chakraborty, a product and solution security professional with deep AppSec audit, VAPT, IoT, OT, and ISO 27001 grounding have to convert paper compliance into security proof. Let's welcome Saurav to our podcast and dive into the topic.
Thank you, Prem
Hi,
sir.
Saurav. Welcome
Reconnecting.
to our podcast. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm doing good, sir. How are you?
Good, Saurav. Small intro about yourself, Saurav, to the
Sure.
audience.
Yep, absolutely. So my name is Saurav, as sir already introduced me, and I have more than 9 years of experience. And so I have started my career with as a system admin, and then slowly I have taken the interest in cybersecurity on this journey. And I already completed now, as going to complete 10 years in this field, and slowly transited my career from the endpoint security to the SOC. Currently, I'm working as a product security analyst, as in Siemens, where my job is mostly comprises with the InfoSec as well as the product security of the part. And yes, there's a small intro about me. And once again, Prem sir, thanks to be connected in this.
Thank you, Saurav. My first question: what is the earliest sign ISMS is turning into a checklist and product security is starting to?
So, first of all, I'd like to give a little overview about what we think about the ISMS and the product security. So, let's say an example. We have, well, maybe I have a business, I am a car dealer, right? And so, being as a car dealer, what the first thing I need a building, and inside the building, then I'll be building my that I'll be developing my cars, the machineries, everything should be there. Inside the building, I'll be only not having cars, there'll be people should be working. So ISMS is just like a building security, let's say. The hazards will be requiring for the fire drilling or the security on the perimeter sides. Also the people also be there, so organizational people, technical controls, everything, the lighting, wiring, so everything need to become in the picture, let's say. And then comes the product, that the car I'm talking about. So in that case, the car building, the security of the car features, everything should be coming in the picture. So ISM is actually talking about the governance perspective, where the security should be, how we can apply the security in the governance side mostly, and what is the control and regulation compliance we can follow to it. Whereas the product security mostly follows and focus on the building of the product. So starting from the scratch, from designing itself from until it we take it to the release, everything should be covered and all the security aspects should be measured correctly. Now the question starts is that where does this product security breaks? Because it's not started on the one sector. There are many failure points we can identify in the sense. The first failure point I've always seen is the requirement, not at the build pipelines, not at the release, but at the requirements, because that's where the nobody even in the room yet. So mostly when there's any product security meeting started, most of the time the security team is not involved in these topics. They are not being invited some means. So what happened? The developer just gets a Jira ticket. There's no threat modeling is done, no data classification done. But what happens? No conversation about what the feature or design it for it. So before it, it actually what feature actually touching it, and nothing has been defined yet. So the product is already designed wrong from the start itself before a single line of code is written. People said we have some security assessment or code scanner tool is available, but you cannot sast your way out for a defending your bad architecture decision. That's where the starts happen. Mostly where there's a discussions happen, I have seen there's a shift or change happen in the wordings. people always come up and says that, okay, we're going for the ISO checks or the audit checks, will be going for it. Are we compliant with? Instead of people should be asking what is the risks and how should I mitigate those risks. People just focusing on those, how well and how quickly we can comply myself, and what I need to do next. So this is where this problem started, where people just only focus on the compliance perspective, not on the product itself.
What you are saying is we starting something without having a security in mind, and then we run out to see whether we are complying it or not. I think that's the statement that we are trying to get in here. What does product security break first when ISMS is treated as a checklist? That's what we spoke about, because you cannot have a checklist when we get into an audit section, right?
Yeah.
What could be the next step where we say what are the top three failure points you see, whether people don't understand the requirement, this one, or build pipelines, release, or vendor components? What is the first or three failure points that you look at, sir?
Yeah. So in that case, the first point I've already discussed about the requirement. People are, quite not sure about the what are the requirements they need to put it into it in the security designing it. The second failure point I'd like to highlight is the vendor components. So someone, developing a product, and they pulls a library from the npm packages. This is quite, quite widely used npm package. Nobody checks what is the last commit date, what happened. Nobody want to check or verifies if there is any known CVs already sitting into it. Okay, I'll take a one example how it actually happened. So this back in 2021 December, there was a very infamous vulnerability attack had happened for the Log4j, that is coming with the following with the Log4 shell. A single vulnerable library buried in the hundreds of products. Organizations spent weeks just to identify in if there were any exposed components are there or not. So fact is that nobody has done any checklist, nobody followed such a checklist, no SBM is done, no dependency hygiene was actually checked. So the ISMS says, okay, you have to manage your third party risks, and everyone checks that box. But the reality is different, because the log4 shell didn't work through to the front door. It was always there at the front door, and the half of the organization affected didn't even know where they're running into it. And this is the one of the points I like to highlight. And then comes the third is the build pipeline. How it happens. So everywhere, now the modern security is entirely different. The modern security cloud environments in your pipeline has far more powerful than it is. It is often the single most privileged system in your entire infrastructure, and one of the least scrutinized, I feel like. So if any attacker gains the control of your CI/CD pipeline, they typically gain the ability to modify in the infrastructure. They can deploy your code and access those secrets, often with more privileges than any individual engineer can have it. Okay, so the secret scanning not done properly. No software composition analysis has been done. It's a scanning tool that actually checks if any open source components are actually used or not. No SAS has been done. All are just in advisory mode. People just nodded their heads, followed it, but no practical application has been ever made before. So these findings, whatever they find, the flaws are inside. These findings actually goes to their dashboard. People don't had to get a chance to open those dashboard or verify that if they really have options to closure all these findings. So this is where the failure started, one of the things. And I have personally seen, and in one of my experience, where a pipeline where security gates are actually followed, and the security gates were commented out because people, the
Okay.
project team is thinking they were actually slowing down the release.
Okay. So there could be a commenting that can stop most of the security parameters, is what you are saying, right? Now,
Yes.
what's the false confidence signal organizations confuse with real security? Because you started with pointers saying that you start a product and then you get into understanding it, then comes the security pointer, then the audit guys comes and say this. Now, is there a point that you can say this is confidence or that is false confidence signal? So go to you.
I feel like this false confidence starts where, let's say, the team suddenly comes up with we have a policy defined with the document, everything is written. That's the killer, because people always refer to the artifact, like your the risk. measure, some or some evidence, they actually referred to it. But the security never happened into this. The ISMS said, ensure you follow the secure development process, and that's the ISMS control is there and the policy is that, and you just check the box that we nod our heads at that, okay, we are following it. But in reality, sometimes we notice that nobody check if the developer even knew the what are the top 10 OSP attacks are there. So this is where the training gaps are I have identified. People are not able to identify the real challenges, the real technical problems are actually underlying into the product. So this is a false confidence I've seen in the while doing some auditing or doing some interviews of the project team sites, and more of like they just close a document, taking off the box, which they follow once in a while in annually or quarterly, but the reality is wide open for you.
Okay, got it. So what you are saying is contrast
Yeah.
artifacts like compilation is where policies
This
versus registers versus control effectiveness, tests coverage. Right now, what you cover, what can be the tests, what is that closure rate that you want to know. Where we can say policy exists, but versus the control verified, because you rightly said somebody commenting something, then it can trigger a CI/CD pipeline, and the control verify does not verify because it says that there is a commented thing. It is not verifying about the benchmark and stuff like that, whether that is or not. So compliance without evidence is just confidence theater, is what we are saying, and that's where we see a lot of
absolutely.
challenge when we come to look at false this one. That is the point. Now coming to the next point, uh, how do you define ISMS from a documentation to an operating system for security?
Uh, in that case, I would come up with a different approach. I feel like that we need to just change our wordings for the ISMS. We talk about the ISO, we talk about the certain regulatory compliances that is available in global side. But instead of if you stop calling it as an ISMS and start calling it something else, like say called the security backlog, then you will able to get people's attention. That's what I feel. The moment engineers hear backlog, they'll jump into it. They'll get it. They will start their sprints. They will work on those SLAs. Owner will jump into it to closing all these gaps, and that's a language shift that actually works in the real time. I feel like.
Backlog, they have to put a date to it, right? So that is another challenge. And if you really look at, if you say backlogs, then there is a problem. So people say,
Right.
oh, this has been assigned and it is in put in the backlog for so many weeks or so many days, then there is a challenge. What
Exactly.
must be measurable in ISMS product orgs? Control, coverage, exceptions, time to fix, or vulnerability date?
I think these 4 points are very important, Prem. 4 points I want to apply to every mature organization follows a dashboard. So these four numbers are very important when they're covering in the dashboard itself, starting with the control coverage. Where we
Hmm.
actually doing is what are the percentage of critical assets that the company is having it. That is more important. Not just list. We need to know the what is the percentage of critical assets or applications are actually covered. Then come the exception age. Exception age is something like how long a risk exception is actually sitting in between your system in your organization. How idly it's been how long it's been idle. If it is a more than over 90 days, then it's a debt for us, and people actually forgotten it to actually work on those closures and to get it fixed. And then comes the time to fix, which is like from discovery or discovering those vulnerabilities to get it verified until the closures. But not is just an assignment or not in progress, I'm saying, but the closure. We had to emphasize this word. And comes with the vulnerability date, which is actually the how many total open findings are there, what are the trends are going on up and down in the every week. If that's need to be comprises to get our attention in every product security, I believe.
I think what you are saying is you should have everything as measurable components rather than just having an expectation and then have a time to fix. And then how does continuous improvement look like weekly, not annually?
Well, it's Continuous improvement it's weekly means your secure team has a stand up. That's a good practice, I believe, rather
True.
than relying upon an annual or something you're doing more than 1 year or two. So these three questions I like to ask in every improvement quality we to define it. What closed this week? What are the blocked we have? What is the highest ranking risk is sitting open right now? That's where the plan develop and do see the PDCA cycle we actually talk about. The plan, do, check, and act. This cycle will be completely followed upon. So in that case, we didn't spend more time into it. This PDCA can explain everything in 15 minutes itself, I believe. And here's the analogy that lands, because your engineering teams actually doesn't ship a code once in a year and call it we are done for the day. It takes time, so they actually push it, they monitor it, they patch it, they retrospect it. So it takes time. So in that way, I believe the ISMS need to behave exactly. The controls need to be, that's why I said the first stage that we need to change the lingo. We have to just define the controls as a feature, and we to call the gaps as a bugs, and the risk exception should be considered as a tech debt. In that way the organization can get things right, and I believe the security will not be just a mere department or someone responsibility. It will be like a shared responsibility for all the members, and security stops being a department mere to start being a rhythm also.
Think about some plan, do, check, act, right? So that frame is an engineering term, right? So if you really look at, they look at plan, do, act, and plan, do, check, and act, right? So now
Yeah,
if you look at that, they are talking about backlogs, they'll talk about sprints, they'll talk about control KPIs and retros. So they make it practical rather than, if you do it annually, I think that is not going to be plan, do, check. It is just going to be act, and
correct.
just act once everything is done, and then you say, okay, now let's plan, do, plan, check, and do and action. So that is how it is going to be if you don't do it on a weekly basis as a cadence, what you're saying. Now if ISMS can be measured weekly, it can also protect you daily, because when you say weekly, you are getting to know what are the blockers that you are having. So that makes a lot of difference, right? What is the difference between audit ready and attack ready? Is there something that you can put across, Saurabh?
Yep. So if you're defining something as an audit ready, it means that your documentation is clear. Okay. If you're talking about attack ready, it means your controls are proven. So whatever you have documented, whatever the controls and SOA, the applicability you have defined all into it, it's already proven and it's actually up and running and working in your system and your organization. Though, but these two are completely different things, because the most organization in reality they actually want to invest more on the documentation rather than focusing more on the attack ready pattern.
Thing is, documentation is important, but you will have to look at protection, is what you're saying, rather than
Correct.
saying we are ready with all the documents, but if we are attacked, we don't know what to do, kind of statement, right? So but most of the organizations have some kind of a plan, but it is not that it is 100% proof. And if you are having 100% protection, then you are failing somewhere also. That's the pointer that we should, which control often passes audits but fails breaches. Say, some pointer that I have is access reviews, logging, change controls, segregation of duties. So what are those controls which often pass but fail while it is breached?
Well, I will go one by one. Like what I feel like, these all controls are actually important, but it's often fail to stop any breaches, because let's say for the access review we're talking about, on the paper we always define we are quarterly reviewing the access, and it happens quarterly, and everything is just fine, and we have a checkbox, we just ticked it. But in reality, I have seen in my experience, I'm just sharing that someone exposed an AD group, and a manager just without validating, without doing any checks, just rubber stamping those requests in a 5 minutes, and nobody asks why the developer has an admin access, why a contractual ID need to be on the production environment. Okay, this is in an example exactly a couple of years back in 2022. This is a similar breach happened in Uber. where a contractor's credential was breached, and it happened from his personal system itself, and no one reviewed it. The question to the first thing comes: how come a contractor credentials are on the privilege side? So when it was not reviewed, it became the blast radius for us. And then comes the logging mechanism. So logs exist. We have every activity creates some logs for us. But during an incident, you cannot correlate those logs. Why? Because there's no proper correlation IDs are present. Sometime I've interviewed and I've seen that the logs are only retained for 30 days. But if you have a 30 days retention policy, sometimes I've seen this malware. If there's a breach already happened, the malware or the attacker is sitting in an environment for last 90 days. So there are logs. Absolutely, you are logging it, but it's not able to tell us a story of the chain of events actually happened. So it's if your log is not able to speak up and explain to us what actually happened to your during the breach, so it's not a login. I would call it. It's just you are utilizing the space in the storage portal. That's it. And talking about the change control, what I think, change control is actually where we're doing some change management procedure. So any software code, something need to be updated. So or maybe a new vulnerability was added and we need to patch it. So in that case, so the change control comes in the picture, and we have some in our organization also we follow the segregation of duties or 4I principle also followed. So we have not a same person but different person should be there in the team, who should be verifying, act it, and then push it, and gives the approval, and then we can push those margin. But in reality, things are different, because in papers everything is defined, everything is documented, and we already passed the checklist, and we already passed the regulatory compliance textbook. But in emergency, I have seen that people definitely bypass this change request. This simply, whoever is going to address it, they just uh, done the test and put it in the production without even verifying much. So in that case, what happened? Because the justification is the production is always on fire. That's why. And this is what I feel like we have a policy. That's why I say the ISMS always follows a checklist. But in real time, the product security, we need to validate each and every point. So login, why it is done, why not. We need to ask the real questions to the people. In that case, we'll get the real picture out of it.
Something and
I
randomly doing something, right? So right questions make a lot of difference is what I understand, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Also, right? So whether it is set for 1 month or 3 months, you know, when we say log retention, also we'll have to look also to a stage where how frequently the access reviews also are getting reviewed, because that also becomes a pointer. Because if I have a user who's left the organization and this access is still there, then there's a challenge, right? And try to those account, and we block the access, but we are making the service accounts run on those IDs, then there's a challenge. So you have different pointers that has to go look at. You mentioned one was access, the other was logging, and the change control. What changed, who changed, why they were changed, is there a role reversal that has happened and stuff like that. So I think that's the point that we are trying to get here. What proof should leaders demand that control actually works, right? So what could be those kind of proofs?
I believe the real proof should be leaders' demand is not a policy document, not a dashboard or screenshots of the dashboards. I believe they should be asking the tabletop exercise and what is the outcome of the exercises. If I'm being a leader, I would be asking this question like, show me the red teaming findings and the closure rates. Show me a real alert firing was been done on a real testing environment. Or show me the last time a project team actually pulled those logs during a drill activity and they actually made sense. Not just we need not artifacts, we need evidence out of it. That's what I feel like need to be asked.
We are saying is it has to be evidence based, right?
Correct.
That's the pointer that we want to look at. There's some challenge with my. So what what saying is we can push proofs, real logs and all those things, but samples, you rightly said, tabletops are one of the best ways of having things set. Uh, and this new term that we are talking about, red team finding, so that's one thing that is very important when it comes to cybersecurity, right? These red teams play a very important role, is what I understand, right? Now audits can check the paper, but attackers check the reality, so they look at what exactly they can penetrate and how they can take it easily, rather than having it in a situation where you have that in paper but it does not work, right? So that's a challenge that we should be looking. How should the SDLC plug into ISMS ISO 27001 without slowing product speeds? Because when we bring SDLC and security, there is always a challenge saying that this will slow down my process, this will slow down my development, this will create a blocker. So that's the other point that I want to understand from you, Saurabh.
Well, this is something I always face it every time I meet up with the product team, and there's always that how long it's gonna
Okay.
take for us to get the checks clearance, clear security clearance on this, and what are the topics we need to do it, because we have a release been planned on this time. So yes, I believe based on my experience, I think the reason the security becomes a blocker because it applies as a gate, not as a guardrail. What happens in gate is actually it stops you in every gate and it checks all those and verifies it. But in the guardrails, if you're applying it, it's actually going to guide you for this. This is what I feel like need to be worked on.
Where I'm not able to unmute myself. So sorry about it. So and I
No.
go on mute and it is so. Now coming to the next point that I want to understand is what you would have some minimum pointers that SDLC should follow, right? And how do we secure that also when we integrate ISO 27000? So what are the minimum secure SDLC gates that protect most risks? Threat modeling, SASTs, SEAs, secret scanning, and approval. So, what is that minimum, say, SDLC gates that we should have to protect?
Well, I believe the minimum that moves the needle without killing the speed, I believe. So this is the approach I like to take. It starts with the threat modeling. So when you're designing a product, threat modeling should be introduced at the first stage in the designing stage. Not a 6 hour workshop is needed. And maybe you can spend 30 minutes of your time and ask the really four valid questions that I need to know. What are we building? What can we go wrong? What is the impact? And what do you do about this impact? Done. That's all we could do. Then we just follow with the next step, like the SAST, security static assessment. So we have SAST done in the CI/CD pipelines, where the developers see the findings in the peer itself. They don't need to wait for 3 weeks to get a results, come up and work on it, right? So nobody has to repeat all these things. And also done with the secret scanning. No, it should be a non-negotiable when we're because we are heavily relying upon the cloud infrastructure also. So it should be a non-negotiable, zero exception, run always. And then comes your SCM, the software composition analysis, where actually we check for the dependencies, what are the packages there, what are the pull requests that we made. Everything should be defined into it. And then we need to plan accordingly to the risk tier weight. So like what are the critical products we are having it. If it is a critical product, then okay, we have to apply all the gates. It's mandatory. That's like I said, a non-negotiable. But what about it's a product is an internal tool, not exposed to the internet, and it's actually dealing with low data sensitivity. Do we really need all the stage gates? No, I believe so. It can be still in the advisory mode. So that's my answer is going to be that not everything needs the same friction. We can plan and strategize accordingly based on the product we're building upon and selling it to the market.
I get you. What you're saying is not everything risk that triggered critical path controls mandatory. Low risks can control advisories and all these things. So focus on automation and bring a developer experience is what we are saying. And
Correct.
security that breaks velocity creates shadow process, and the bigger risk is what we see when we look at it. Now we've been talking about security. When you started also, again I wanted to tell you, you have a vendor is what you started with, right? So third party vendor and open source, where do the checklists ISMS programs fail to hardest?
So well, I feel that ISMS says that we assess the third party suppliers, okay, and we just tick that box,
Hmm.
we're done. But the assessment is, if in the reality is the assessment nothing but just a set of question IDs in the PDF format. That vendor file itself, sometime we just assess it and it actually reviewed every in 2 years. That's not an assessment. That's hoping that nothing should go wrong into it. And what I feel like this is where the most product organization cannot tell you every open source components are actually in the production the line. That's a reality, I feel like.
One, what's the missing most? See what I meant to say. What is missing most often? eh, the SBOM supplier assessment depth, patch SLA, provisions check. What do you think is most missing often?
Okay. With that, I'll just give a short example about the one topic that I referred is Log4Shell. Log4Shell
Mhm.
was when it was dropped. Organizations were spending weeks just to find out if they're really impacted, because nobody is aware of the SBOM, what SBOM is, how it works.
Mm.
The SBOM could have been an answer that could have solved their problem in a minute.
Yeah.
Reswarm is actually where enables the team to pinpoint the vulnerable components like Log4Shell is there, so more components will be there across the portfolio in minutes rather than days, and drastically improving those response times. So if a breach occurs, Nesbom actually helps responders quickly to determine if a what do you call the compromised component is really exists in the infrastructure or not. Whereas a lot of my audience maybe did not aware of, SBOM is actually software bill material. It's an essentially a digital ingredient to list all your softwares for the. And when come the patching, you talk about the patching the SLAs. Patching SLA should be in the tail. So we have a critical CV in a vendor component. Okay. So I've seen sometime when I ask this question that what are you going to work on those CVs? What is the SLA point when you define it? So is it 24 hours SLA or 72 hours? Or who enforce those patches? If the answer is like we email the vendor and we just wait, in that can that's not a program, that's not a full-fledged process. That is just like a prayer that how everything should not go on the south. So I'll take a one more example. Like really 9 years back, an infamous WannaCry ransomware attack happened. Okay, so it was the issue was when the ransomware used the internal blue exploit of a Microsoft to target the vulnerability in the Windows Server SMB protocol. Okay, I'll not go much in the technicality, but what actually happened is the Microsoft, when they identified, they released the patch within the March itself, March 2017. But the attack occurred in May 2017. It means people took time to apply those patches. It was not never been timely patched on those systems, which affecting almost millions of systems been globally impacted. Also, it crippled the organizations like UK's National Health Service (NHS), forcing to cancelling those thousands of appointments and surgeries just because the system is having to a downtime due to the ransomware attack. So these are the things we need to be aware of it.
What you are saying is, see, when we had the inventory which was physical, we were able to verify that, right? So now the challenge that we see is what is the software that is white labeled, who is the purchaser, all those things has to come and be in a centralized place, which I think is missing in most of the organizations or the departments that we are looking at. It's not that they are not having those assets, but it is more of the reporting that has to happen in the form of the user saying that I am buying a new tool, and this has to go to the inventory of the software bomb, software bill of material, where you say that X department owns this software and it is being licensed to maybe the department or to one specific person in that department. So that clarity if we are able to have, then I think SBOM should be in a position to match most of the things. Only challenge that we see when it comes to audits is updating the inventory, which I think there's a big discussion that is going on around that SBOM, because every software, if you purchase, once it is installed, it should be saying that it has to get into the central inventory as a record that should go, is what we've been talking. But how far that is realistic, how far that is going to happen is a discussion still on in progress, right? So your product is only as secure as the code you did not write. So I think that's the way we want to put that. And now coming to the way we look at vulnerability, so how do you stop, scan, and ignore behavior?
Uh, the question comes as one root cause I've already identified. Nobody owns the finding. When there is a vulnerability has been reported, we always come to the question of who should own it: the risk owner, or the asset owner, or the security team, or the vendor team. That's a create a lot of confusions out of it. So nobody owns the finding, and then what happens? The security scans the findings, go into the report, and report goes somewhere else. The engineering team says that it's a security team's job. The security team says the engineer team's job, and the findings, whatever is there, sits open for last 8 months until there's a breach happens, and everyone is surprised that okay, we got a breach. So we need to prioritize. I think the exploitability in that.
One is the record of the software, then the ownership to the software. I am rephrasing it now, because now who owns it, who has to patch it, who has to update it, and if there is a version change, who has to intimate that what we purchased was X and the version today is X plus 1, because the version has changed, and the records has to have that we just upgrade the software, but the price that we have paid is for the whole software, which includes the upgrade. So I think that's one pointer that we need to look at, bringing that SBOM sanity to the organization, which will help is what should be the default SLA bands for product vulnerability. And again we talk about who owns it.
Uh, Before coming to the default ISLA, I think we need to just understand the what are the factors or the prioritization people mostly do it. So like the people just push back on the CVSs. The CVSs actually is a common vulnerability scoring systems which give you a score of based on the severity, right? So sometimes people talk about we have a CVS score of 9.8 and we have a CVS score of 7.2. Now people need to understand, I think as a infosec personnel, I think we need to differentiate these two topics thing. The fact is CVS just give you a score, it doesn't give you the context of that severity. Because when it says that, let's say I'm going to assess doing the assessment and I'm seeing the CVS score 9.8, it's actually sitting on an air gap system where there is no connectivity with the internet. It's totally in an isolated zone. Is a prior is the one who's actually sitting on the public side, and the next one is the 9.8 one. So I feel the SLA bands, well, that really works when critical with active exploits are there. 24 hours, we actually have to be taken up on any critical exploits. No debate about this. If it is a high internet facing, then it should be within a few days, I believe, 3 to 5 days. I'm not defining this, but this is how I've seen it in my experience. If it is a high but internal, we have time. We can take a couple of weeks more to get it address those vulnerabilities. And if it is a medium and low, we have months. Can take a 90 days of pause. Or if it is a low severity or a very informative one, that can be tracked and reviewed quarterly in that sense.
What we are emphasizing is we should look at the discipline, the severity, what is the context that we are looking at. Recommend that you put a owner to it. That's the primary thing that we should look at. And product teams want to fix if there is a product issue. When there is security, has to be enabled in such a way that we verify everything, so that that is coming into the system. A vulnerability report is not just a security score, but closure of security also is what I'll say. When you say which we are gap, there's a gap, and we can get into, when it comes to audit, you can get into the NC mode, and that can also trigger a lot of noise in the system, right? Now when we were talking about logging and monitoring, what evidence look like for product security? What does evidence look like for a product security?
Well, in that case, I'll just go back to my days when I was working as a tier two, tier three analyst actually here. So most of the in every DFI engagement happens, the first question is always asked that can you give us a logs from last 90 days across the systems? And we get some bizarre answers. We sometimes we get an answer like depressingly often, like we have 30 days retention period, or those logs are not centralized. Worst of all, we could say that we have log in that system, but we never set up a forwarding. It means the logs never been reached to the same tool. There's no centralized mechanism available. So in such cases, any breach happen, we don't have a chance to get all those logs. And now the challenge is we are in a blogging state, so we cannot investigate something that we didn't record it. This is where the challenge comes first.
I think what I will say is one of my experiences. We were having logs, but we were not having it centrally. I'll take that point because when we started looking at logs, what used to happen is as we are having this GDPR compliance and everything, you cannot ship logs from UK to US because it becomes a GDPR compliance, right?
Yep.
So we did not have a centralized, but what we did was we started looking at log aggregation at zone level or region level. So when we had a UK based client, we kept all the logs at the UK location.
Correct.
So we didn't know this that it was sending to a central location, and we were sending logs from one region to another, and we were getting huge bandwidth costs. And we started looking at where was this bandwidth costs coming in. Then we figured out the logs are in one region, the log aggregation happening in another region. So pushing logs of say about 3 to 4 GB of logs every day. So
Yep.
that when we found, and then we started looking at how do we stop that, is when we understood logs cannot be centralized when you are in different zones and stuff, where we'll have to look at centralizing logs for that region is what we understood. And that's where we started looking at logs. What must be logged on products? Are you saying authentication events, privileged actions, configuration changes, or API abuse signals?
What must be logged without exception is we can start with authentication events. Every login, every failure, every success, every MFA wrappers, every token issued, everything should be tracked. Even though the privileged actions of it, then every time someone touches the production's environment, run as any command as an admin, access any sensitive information, everything should be tracked upon it. Then comes the configuration changes. The question comes is who changed it, what changed it, when and from where is that the change has been done. That should be tracked upon. Talking about the API abuse signals, so right, the telemetries will be requiring to identify if any rate limiting breaches are there, or any abnormal payload size has been been incorporated with those APIs, or any authentication pattern that's completely outside the normal behavior. That's where we can start doing the login, and we can it will help us in the finding out the actual problem when there's a real breach happens.
So we were talking about logging, right? Now, how do we ensure? Because we logged many of the things. We log everything that is there, and we also have a retention period. How do we ensure logs are useful during incidents like correlation IDs, retention integrity, retention and integrity? So, how do we look at having that they become useful during an incident?
Well, in that case, I said the details that separates mature login from a checkbox login is the correlation IDs, I believe. Every request, every transactions, every actions should be tagged with a unique ID of it that flows from end to end of the system. So when an incident happens at a very odd hours of time, let's say at a 2 o'clock in the midnight, your analyst actually pulls one ID, and it actually helps them to reconstruct the entire chain of events. Without it, what so you have to do the thread across those disconnected sources manually, because when a breach happens, those hours will cost you everything. And talking about the retention, in that sense, I believe minimum 12 months of data we can try to retain it for the security events. So the security events I mostly emphasize. 90 days is not enough, I feel like. A lot of companies we follow 90 days in a different, we bifurcate in the 30 days of active logs and 60 days of archival mode we actually keep it, right? Because the attackers know your retention window. They are very smart enough. And when there's a sophisticated breach happens, this average dwell times are also very high. It can exceeds 200 days. Now, there are a lot of mature models been introduced and brought it up into the picture. So the dwell time has been cut off to a few weeks or something. But still, 90 days, we need to look upon more than that. Even some regulations, global regulations like your GDPR, though doesn't explicitly said how much retention period should be there, but some regulations like SOX should be says that at least 6 to 7 years. Then PCI says that minimum 1 year of retention period should be there, right? So and you need to validate your logs with those performing some mock exercises. Like we have a team, like I was explaining about the red team and red teamers activity, or sometimes the SOC team is also involved. So purple team exercise can be done where you can simulate a real type of attack, check the alerts have been fired or not, and it can help us to identify that okay, my system is able, or my logs are able to catch up the meaningful events. So in that case, we just don't assuming that we are safe, we are also verifying it in that terms.
Okay, got it. So what we are saying is incident ready telemetry is what we need to have, and we need to have use cases where we can mention how it is detected, how is it getting verified, how the alerts are checked. The purple team, as you said, we will have to look at validation is what we are saying. We cannot reconstruct the story, you cannot find win in the incident, because you need to simulate also certain incidents where we are able to bring up the attack surface, or how do we protect them going forward, because that is going to be a case study for us, or that's a use case for us. Now coming to the areas where the devices are there, where we see the IT and OT devices that are there, and they are part of the production environments, what difference what different, or when products touch the operational systems, how does you look at that, Arun?
So OT, the operation technologies, I believe it's an entirely different world itself.
Mhm.
Even when I joined Siemens, and this is where my OT journey started. Before that, I was only supporting for IT, and I always have feel like whatever, because they also have the similar system. They have a PC built with Windows machines. All you just need to do the same way we've been practicing it for a long period.
Okay.
But this is where the standard ISMS thinking breaks completely in, because in IT, you patch something, you update, you restart,
Mm.
and
Mm.
everything comes in the fast cycles, and
Yeah.
everything in falling in an acceptable downtime. But in operation in OT, it's an industry, so a patch might require shutting down the entire production line, and a restart might mean a safety system may go offline also. So how critical is going to be, we need to understand. So change windows also measured in months, not days. Equipment running your operation environment might be a 15-year-old Windows XP or Windows 7 machines with no vendor support available right now in the real time. So we can't patch directly with the cause, because it's risky, because it will not just impact the entire production line, but also compromises the safety and availability. Also, the people who are actually working in this field, it can cause a mayhem in those machines. So it's not a security failure, I would call it. It's a reality that happens in the OT.
Now how do you look at risks from, or let me put it this way, where does the risk spike happen, or remote access, legacy protocols, patch constraints, segmentation gaps? But you mentioned one point where you have legacy systems like Windows 95, Windows 97. Those also are systems that can be part of a spike that they can bring in. So your take on it, sir?
Yeah, so my take on those machines are that is running on legacy protocols, or the legacy systems actually. The rig spikes hardest, I believe, it started with the remote access. They have a remote
Mm.
activity which is very important for their production lines. But when the COVID started, almost 5 years, 6 years back, it actually forced the OT environments online almost overnight, where the VPN stood up quickly, but the MFA was not able to be enforced. Even the monitoring was non-existent that period of time. So the attack surface that has not fully been reviewed on the stems. And maybe talking
Mm-hmm.
about those legacy protocols like Profinet, Modbus, DNP3, these are made for the products designs for reliability. They're not security. That's like in IT, we have HTTPS or certain protocols where we actually have a, you can take the TLS measures are available. We can apply those measures and we can make it secure and safeguarded so people cannot eavesdrop those communication. But in the OT protocols are not like that. They've never been designed for that. No security, no authentication, no encryption mechanisms are available for those protocols. So if an attacker gets into that segment of your OT environment, this speaks the language of every device on it. And talking about the segmentation gaps, in ITOT boundary is supposed to be in hardware level. Okay,
Mm.
most of the attacks patterns starts from the IT itself and is actually transferred to the OT sites. So in practice, a historian server actually it's actually sits on the both the networks. And maybe an engineer who's actually running with this laptop is in between this IT OT zone both, and they also have a
Mm.
firewall. But the funny fact is that sometimes the firewall rules have not been reviewed for last 8 9 years, and they're just working accordingly because nobody is ready to touch those machines, because if something goes wrong,
Bringing them is a problem.
cause
Bringing them.
a lot of issues. Even I have my experience where I was trying to apply some patches and some hardening protocols, hardening mechanisms to a Windows 7 machines, where a lot of people know the Windows 7 is now obsolete. We're not using it anymore. There's no vendor support available, but we need to
Yeah.
apply those. And there's no way to upgrade those machines to the Windows 10, because if it does, whatever the backend machines or applications are running, immediately it goes off.
It was
There'll be
off.
a compatibility issue. So that's kind of challenges are always there.
I think what you are saying is the older systems integrating them to the latest system is always been a challenge. You take it whether it is the cloud migration also. If you still have a legacy thing, you will still have to run it as a hybrid model only. You cannot run it as a complete cloud model. So there is always a challenge there, right? So let's keep them realistic so that they are right, and compassionate compensating controls has to be looked at, and strict segmentation, as we rightly said. This is a legacy system, this is the latest system, this is the gap that we have, and that is where is there. And monitoring becomes more important there. Access also, because you may not get the right access also to be put on those systems. There is always a challenge there also. And now, what you are saying also is changing Windows. I think Windows upgradation itself is a big challenge where half of the DLLs or half of the works will not work. Is what, and again, if you don't do, you are getting into safety constraints, right? So that's the challenge that we see. Now, what we want to understand is the final point as we are running on top of that. Uh, when you talk about AI being in the product security, what new failure patterns are emerging in AI, and how does AI assisted development change risk, insecure code generation, fast dependency sprawl, and weaker review? So these are the 2 pointers that I wanted to understand. So what do you, sir?
Sure. So AI now is a burning topic, and everyone is actually chasing behind the AI. How to, how effectively we can utilize in our security in our daily life also. So there are two things are happening. What I have noticed is simultaneously that compound with each other. The AI system development is now accelerating much faster because the codes outputs are now getting generated. Developers are shipping faster data, more codes are getting generated, but in a very short span of time. But when they're we have been rushing, we have been been running on a lightning speed, more dependencies are also created, more attack surfaces are also created in less time. But when it comes to the security review cycle, that is not scaled much yet with the latest patterns. And also the second thing I like to highlight is the code that AI generates. It's not inherently secure, because if you're taken upon any LLMs that has been trained upon those codes, they might be trained on the internet, and the internet has a lot of insecure codes are available. You can just pull up any codes that will, if you do a little bit of more assessment, you can find out there's some SQL injection patterns are already available, or some hard coded credentials are already there available, in the sense missing input validation is not done. So any sort of arbitrary code is, if I'm running on those inputs, it can let it pass. I have personally reviewed some AI generated codes within all the across this, and the developers accepted those. I have shared my suggestion, and the developer accepted those suggestion without even reading carefully because it just looked right for them. So this is a challenge. We already have it, and it's the development is getting faster, but the risk is new for us. This emerging technologies that we've been doing it. Talking about the defects also now in a quite rise, where you can easily mimicking with any famous personality, you can do their movement, and it's really hard to define distinguish between the reality and the fake deepfakes one in that cases. There's a latest vulnerability also when a campaign is going on called the click fix. So
Hmm.
where the malicious actors, what they're doing, they're leveraging those AI models to use some prompted commands, a malicious command, and they're tricking the users that you just copy paste it in your system to run it on it. And what people are doing, the moment you paste those commands, immediately, so it will download some malware and will implement, compromise, your entire system. So while trying to resolve an infrastructure issue, the AI, is bringing us some new more challenges. Now we're talking about some agentic AI also coming up, which is helping us in the automation stuffs, right? The autonomous
Yeah.
agents have been introduced. Now, I think last year itself, like, there's a bizarre news came up with, like, there's an agent was working in the infrastructure, and there's a issue been flagged it up, and the AI agent thought determined the best fix is going to be delete the entire environment and recreate the environment at the admin level access. And this was caught at the vigilance when human vigilance has come in the picture. Now, but and also it actually caught by an accident. It was about to get missed. Just imagine if it was
Hmm.
really been introduced, it will cause a mayhem in that system. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's where we are stuck in.
So that brings us the pointers that I have taken some of the notes which we have been discussing over the last 55 minutes, right? So check for not produce safety is what we are saying, and real safety or security is proven through tested measurable controls. That's the first point that we are saying. Attack ready beats audit ready. Demand evidence, tests, drills, closures, not just policies and registers, because we have seen a lot of policies and registers now. After the AI coming, at least we are seeing a lot of things that are getting tested, simulated, and then we are able to prove, get some of the secure. SDLC works when it is automated, risk tied, and developer friendly. Security becomes a real release enabler, because everybody wants to release better code, safer code, faster releases, and faster deployments, right? So that's what we can achieve. Supply chain and vulnerability closures are true maturity makers. SBOM, SCA, patch SLAs, ownership clarity makes a lot of difference when we really look at how ISMS can help us in this one. Now you can in 90 days you can shift from paper to proof with controls tested like CI/CD, pipeline integrity, telemetry readiness, which we spoke about, because you need a telemetry to look at that is getting updated on a regular basis, right? And the metrics that are maintained for us to look at. So that's the pointers that we want to has a takeaway. And any final words before we conclude, Saurabh?
So first of all, thanks for having me, Prem, and it was a really great conversation. And I hope we will to share more platforms like this, and we'll share our insights about the what is the latest things that are happening, how we could make up. Being an as infosec professional, the first thing that come up, in my mind is how we can safeguard, how can we make the best practices among the not just an
Yeah.
organization level, but as in our daily life also. Since we are quite exposed to the digital assets, we need to be quite be aware of what's happening around the world and how could he share this information to the right people at the right time.
No, I definitely take that point, because now in India, ISMS is one point, but now DPDP is going to play a major role where you need to look at compliances, right? So you cannot have checklists only. You need to look at controls. You need to look at policies. You need to look at proofs that give you that value that the implementation of the policy is done, and we are on the right track. So that's what I think is more. So thank you for bringing the ground reality here on this. And the strongest insight today is ISMS should behave like a living operating system, controls that are integrated, tested, measured, and improved continuously is what we are saying. Passing audit is good, but protecting customers, platforms, and reputation it should be considered as a mission, right? So, if you want to look at transformation of an ISM from checklist to security proof production, connect with our team or people who can help you get to understand this. Kreesalis has a product that we are trying to bring up, and it's a community that we are building, where we want all the GRC teams to be part of the system and also bring up a product which can enable GRC frameworks for us. So with this, I think we are on top of the hour. And good day, and thank you for being here, Gaurav. It means a lot of thing for us, because making time to be part of the podcast and discuss this real pain points is required in today's environment. And thank you for that, Gaurav.
Thank you so much, man, for having me.